Sounds like fun.
Okay.
What kind of stuff is it, do you know?
Well, it's a little of everything. Yeah, I mean, from structures to motive power to um, scenery, etc.
Okay.
It's kind of a. Um, he showed me some stuff in the past, which I thought was, qualified, but then he was working on different things sporadically and not really concentrating on one certificate and getting it done. So anyway, by going over and talking to him first and looking at what it is, then that'll make it, what do you want to say, expedient when you come.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
We've got a system now, so it's good.
Yeah, yes, we sure do. Yeah.
Okay, kind of got spoiled with Wayne, though. Hi, Wayne.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our July meet. Good to have you all. We have about 22 people in here, so I hope everybody's doing well. We're going to go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. We're going to be having, as you know, a layout tour of the San Diego and Arizona Eastern HO layout from the museum, the Model Railroad Museum in San Diego. And Mike Thornhill, a club member, will be presenting that. We have a couple of show and tells that we will do after the main layout tour. Don Fowler and Joe Niscoda have some projects, and Joe's actually going to do like a mini layout tour. And then we'll have part two of the layout tour for with Mike, going over the narrow gauge on the SD and AE. I think I'm probably saying that right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mike. Mike Thornhill, and he will be telling us all about the layout at the museum for the San Diego Club. So give me just a second here. You ready, Mike?
All right, you got sound.
Hang on here. Go ahead and unmute. I'm going to mute myself.
Right. And can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. All right, very good. Are we ready to start? All right. Before I actually get started in the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Roger Gredvig for all of his photos that'll be in the PowerPoint presentation. We're following along with the entire line, so hopefully give you some good information here. I'd also like to thank Trudy Seeley for bringing me into this here today, and Ryan, our host. As Ryan introduced me, my name is Mike Thornhill. I am the Wednesday, Thursday crew leader at the San Diego Model Railroad Association's layout, and I've been a club member since 2003. We are about to embark on a PowerPoint tour of the San Diego and Arizona Eastern layout provided by the San Diego Model Railroad Association, and you'll discover why this railroad was called the Impossible Railroad. We can go back one view right there. The San Diego and Arizona Eastern, go back one slide there if you would, Ryan.
I was looking on it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. The San Diego and Arizona Eastern HO layout models the San Diego to El Centro tracks in the late 40s, early 50s. This layout is 142 feet long and covers 50 scale miles in mainline track. You can follow the line from San Diego all the way across the Mexican border and all the way down to El Centro. Okay, next. The front entry to the museum hosts 4 separate clubs with 6 different layouts, ranging from an N-scale layout, 2 distinct and separate HO layouts, a 2-rail O-scale layout, a 3-rail O-scale toy train gallery, and an outdoor exhibit in 2-rail depicting buildings and scenes from the 1915 Panama, California exhibition. This entire layout was inspired by an article in the 1938 Model Craftsman magazine by the secretary and general manager of the Southern Pacific and a charter member of our club, J.D. Gross-Didier. He wrote a real railroad to model because it was the perfect railroad to model in HO scale, as its short length and the variety of scenery, along with trackage rights by both the Santa Fe and the Southern Pacific, were at either end of the line. There are also two branch lines approximately 25 miles long extending from downtown San Diego. One runs northeast through the foothills of La Mesa, clear out to Lakeside, and the other runs around San Diego Bay to Coronado and North Island. Next. Okay, I think you have to go back one there, Ryan. There we go. The track layout plan was designed by a railroad preservationist, Larry Rose, AIA, and construction began in 1982, with most trackage completed by 1997. Of the 148 miles of trackage, 44 miles travel through northern Baja from Tijuana to Tecate, Mexico, on the Tijuana to Tecate or the Ferrocarril Tijuana-Tecate line. Landmark buildings that are modeled use a target date of a given day in 1949 through the early 1950s. And the Santa Fe Union Station in the background there, the Union Station was built in 1915 specifically for the expected visitors for the exhibition, and was jointly shared through a mutual agreement with the San Diego and Arizona Railroad. The Beacon's Van and Storage building is still in existence. Prominent buildings include the Pacific Square Dance Hall, along with Benbow Furniture, Tower Bowling, Perrin Hall, and other buildings of the era. Lindbergh Field was completed in 1928 and is the third largest runway airport, single runway airport in the world. Its original location was along the Pacific Coast Highway, and prior to its present position, which was relocated in 1965 and was dedicated by then Governor Ronald Reagan. Ryan Aviation, famous for the Spirit of St. Louis, was adjacent to Lindbergh Field as well and represents the structure with great detail. A tarmac view of the 1949 Lindbergh Field still is pictured right along the Pacific Coast Highway. Should be the next slide. There we go. There's the tarmac view. Next, trackage to Los Angeles is evident on these Santa Fe rails heading north out of downtown. The La Mesa Spur continues out to Lakeside on the old San Diego and Cuyamaca line. 3 branch lines were consolidated into the San Diego and Arizona by 1912 by John D. Spreckles. Those lines were the San Diego and the Cuyamaca, San Diego, Cuyamaca and Eastern, San Diego Southern, and San Diego Southeastern lines. The freight station in La Mesa is along the branch line, and looks like there's some police activity coming up right here in the next slide. Looks like someone's in trouble. There we go. Got pulled over by a motorcycle policeman. Along with a few typical buildings of the era, much of the downtown area still needs to be completed. Trackside industries modeled in this era include a fuel tank farm and the Willard Battery Company. Staging yard for brand new automobiles in 1949. Today, this scene would depict a massive 86-foot auto rack in the National City sidings. The next 4 scenes are of the tuna industry, which was well represented with major tuna fleets supplying multiple canneries before the industry vacated our San Diego waterfront for better fishing grounds. The Pacific Coast Viaduct adjacent to the Santa Fe Yard. Santa Fe Engine House. Notice there's a welder busy at work. This scene depicts a city work crew repairing a street lamp approaching the viaduct. Another view of the busy Santa Fe yard and the engine repair shop. Inflatable natural gas tanks were quite the sight in San Diego. The platform would rise or fall as it is being filled or depleted. San Diego trolley ceased operations by 1949, and the last PCC, or President's Committee car, street car, shut down in April 1949 as a result of a conglomerate formed by the National City Transportation Company, not affiliated with National City. And this conglomerate consisted of Standard Oil, General Motors, Firestone Tire and Rubber, all to sell oil, fuel, and tires for the new buses solely to make money. Today, the trolleys are back, and in the background, you can see the citrus soap manufacturing company along the trolley line. The Porter Pickle Packing Company and the San Diego, Arizona Eastern Freight House in this scene. The next three scenes would be a street side of the San Diego and Arizona Eastern Freight House and the track side of the freight house itself. Next slide shows, again, more of the trackside freight loading area. Again, more trackside industries as we move through downtown. The next three slides, we have weathered rolling stock by a fellow club member, Jerry Jackson, who is an internationally awarded modeler renowned for his accurate weathering techniques and skills. Jerry takes these actual photos of real trains and models them precisely. It's quite an amazing thing to see his handiwork. He's very well sought after by other club members for help with modeling and weathering. Next, we have a cross view of the layout through the trolley lines. The trolley lines run out through La Mesa. And now we have another view of the Santa Fe engine repair shed. Next two shots are the equipment yards are spread through the downtown area. The San Diego Gas and Electric Power Station is in the background. You'll notice that there is a great deal of detail on the roof of this particular equipment building. One of at least 17 humorous vignettes placed throughout the layout. Here we have a 5-gallon bucket of paint that fell off the platform and splattered all over the boss's britches. How many other humorous vignettes will we be able to spot throughout the layout? We are approaching National City, the packing house, and the stockyards. Next. We have the National City Depot. This is the home of the San Diego Electric Railway Museum. This is the original West Coast Santa Fe terminus built from 1882. This is the oldest railroad structure still standing in San Diego County in its original location. This historical building that you can still visit today, which was fully restored back in 1998. Here we have the Capitanopolis Steel Fabrication Facility, and in the background is the Union Ice Company. This is the backside of a typical diner found along the tracks. And the next slide will show us the Cosmic Diner front side. And the question is, how many attendants does it take to service an open convertible with 3 young ladies? Anybody have an answer on that one? All right, next two shots of the line side industry, Schmidt's Gravel Company. And the next two shots behind the Schmidt's Gravel Company, we see the Western Salt Company in Chula Vista. It's got a real photograph of what the area looked like back in the day, and there was a narrow gauge railroad operated from the Western Salt Company. Union Icing Company has an icing dock. Railroads needed ice every 100 to 150 miles along the line, and a good source for water. And this created a lot more industries. We have some teenagers gathered for a little drag racing activity, but uh-oh, what's waiting for them at the other end? And we're about to enter San Ysidro before crossing into Tijuana, Mexico. Transitioning into Mexico, at this point, the milepost designations change to kilometers, and we'll be referring to those as K5, K12, etc. The international border crossing in 1949 in the early 50s, the Tijuana Depot is still in existence. That's that building you see in the background beyond the tracks. Although the border fencing has changed significantly through the years. The next four scenes are some typical structures in Tijuana, right along the tracks. Got the international crossing, the fencing. And here's a vintage street scenes of Tijuana in the late 40s, early 50s. And next slide shows that there was, it looks like that cart was a little too much of a load for that poor burro. You notice it's completely off the ground. All right, you can almost smell the wonderful aroma of carne asada tacos emanating from that taqueria. The next three slides, we're coming up on the typical Mexican wedding scene. And now we're approaching tunnel number 1, first of 4 tunnels in Mexico. There's a total of 21 tunnels on the San Diego and Arizona line. Some of the tunnel portals were beautifully built out of cut stone or concrete. Most were in timber later on down the line. The railroad line is fairly flat through this part of Mexico until it reaches K5 in Agua Caliente. Then it starts to climb in grade with a rise of nearly 1% grade. Climbing up through the 0.9% grade, climbing up to Valle Redondo. At the depot in Valle Redondo, we see J.D. Spreckles' business car, number 50, sitting on a siding waiting for the president of the line, John Spreckles, to come out from having a little coffee break. Climbing out of the valley of Redondo on toward Tecate, the line makes 2 loops. You look at the arrow pointing toward Redondo, and the 2 loops develop grade. And from the upper loop, one can look down on the 2 track levels directly below. This was quite a sight. Approaching Tecate, next to the border, which is nearly 50 miles from San Diego, we can see the sidings for the brewery, Tecate Brewery, are just ahead. And crossing over a girder bridge over the second crossing of the Tijuana River, this tunnel facade is still well constructed from cut stone. Necessary compression on the layout shows the all-steel Upper Campo Creek trestle in the background. In 1935, Alberto Aldrete began brewing the fermented sap of agave plant, and in 1940 started brewing beer as a sideline. Named after the village of Tecate, the beer became the first maquiladora in Baja California. Sold in 1954 to a Monterrey, Mexico brewing company, which brewed beer in the German style. You may recognize the name as Bohemia. Today, only Tecate beer and Carta Blanca are still produced at the Tecate plant. Tecate was the very first beer to be canned in Mexico. Custom of squeezing lime in beer began in Tecate by a Scottish master brewer. He used the tradition taken from the British Navy to use limes to prevent scurvy in sailors. Now here we're crossing back from Tecate into the US through tunnel number 4. This is, let's go back one slide there, Ryan. And this is an area that's relatively unseen by the public unless we invite them into the layout. And then it's quite impressive. Here we have a westbound train through Campo on the US side going into Mexico, probably with a whole freight train full of beer. We have a former military base on the US side is now home to the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum, the PSRM. Currently, steam locomotive number 104, a 280 consolidation, is one of the impressive exhibits at the PSRM. This was an original steam locomotive which actually ran on the line and was on display for years in a deteriorated state at the Del Mar Fairgrounds until acquired by the museum. Crossing the international border at Division in tunnel number 4 back into the US. This is the Upper Campo Creek Viaduct. This is our club's rendition of the trestle. It's followed by a photo of the real trestle, which is still out there today. Now we're climbing the grade from Campo at milepost 83. We've achieved a 1.4% grade climbing up to High Pass. Helpers were kept at Clover Flat, as indicated by the arrow on the line, to assist eastbound trains, usually with a 260 mogul. Also, they kept helpers at Coyote Wells for westbound trains on the eastern side of the Laguna Mountains in the desert. Coming across a grain elevator, which is within sight of High Pass. High Pass is the highest elevation on the line at 3,660 feet above sea level. This is amazing that our San Diego and Arizona line runs from sea level up to this height of 3,660 feet above sea level, all the way down to minus 48 feet below sea level in El Centro. We've crossed the summit up here, the Tecate Divide at milepost 82 from San Diego, actually 82 miles from San Diego. And we're approaching a fictitious narrow gauge area called SEMA. This area has been created for those modelers that model in the HO narrow gauge. SEMA, next slide right there. And there we go. It is one of 18 control panels on the layout. And this HO area is still unfinished. Dual gauge trackage in and around the 2-stall engine repair facility in SEMA. Close inspection reveals an incredible amount of detail when the roof is lifted off, even down to the assortment of tools on the workbench. Next slide. Yep. Put the next one there. There we go. Now you can see the incredible detail and even the tool assortment on the workbench. Very enough. Okay. And that's me right there with the mask. And I'm the Wednesday through Thursday crew leader, as I mentioned. This is David. He is our first Sunday crew leader at the Jacumba staging yard and control panel. We have 3 large monitors placed strategically around the layout to help operators keep track of their trains, with up to 8 different views on each of the monitors controlled by the operators. Trains preparing to begin their descent to the Carrizo Gorge and the desert floor. The next 3 views will be of the Carrizo Gorge trestle, known as the Goat Canyon Trestle. It was built as a permanent shoe fly in 1932 after numerous calamities when Tunnel 15 collapsed, creating the longest and highest wooden trestle in North America. The Goat Canyon Trestle is 633 feet long, 185 feet tall, with 15-degree curvature. On October 22nd, 1932, Tunnel 7 burned for the second time, resulting in 7 20-degree curves on the line. The model of the Goat Canyon trestle was built in the late 40s by one man using redwood Venetian blinds cut to scale. It took him 2 years to complete the trestle, and then we acquired it for our layout. It's pretty impressive. Crossing the Carrizo Gorge trestle required a reduced speed of only 5 miles an hour, resulting in the railroad to be called the Impossible Railroad, or to use its initials, SD and A, the slow, dirty, and aggravating. In 1926, the silent Wallace Beery film, Beggars of Life, was filmed on the line prior to the 1932 trestle construction. Back in the 60s, a Southern Pacific beer train derailed on the gorge, resulting in a number of reefers tumbling clear to the bottom of the gorge. Those reefers are still there today. Not known if there's still beer in them or not. There might have been a lot of salvage attempts at that. Here we have hikers in the gorge confronted by some railroad personnel with a sign that says private property, no trespassing. So those hikers are going to have to return to the way they came from. Exiting the gorge, we begin our 2.2% descent down to the flat desert floor in the last of 21 tunnels on the line. The next 3 views shows a leveling out on the desert floor. We encounter a pickup truck that took a corner a little too fast, flipping over and losing all of his chickens. There's a young lady chasing a coyote trying to retrieve her prized chicken. I think she's going to lose that foot race. Now we're looking east toward Plaster City and the U.S. gypsum mining operation. Here is another not so humorous vignette, not generally seen by the public unless we invite them into the layout. The Plaster City gypsum mining facility used narrow gauge equipment to extract raw gypsum from the Fish Creek Mountains, located 26 miles to the northwest. After transporting and processing, 3 railroads provided service to the facility: San Diego and Arizona, the Southern Pacific, and now the Union Pacific. Mainstay of the Imperial Valley Agricultural District is their sugar beet industry, among many other farming products in this rich agricultural region. The El Centro icing facility, again, every 100 to 150 miles, producing 300-pound blocks of ice. Imagine how much ice would take to fill a 100-car train. Smaller communities such as Sealy, Dixieland, and Wilsey line the route to El Centro, the terminus for the San Diego and Arizona Railroad. This little church here has an amazing interior detail with organ pipes made out of stainless steel piping to avoid corrosion that brass would corrode over time. And it looks like they're still working on the steeple up there as well. A small town auto collision with a nearly empty street has the local police officer scratching his head. What do I do now? The Southern Pacific Depot in El Centro, which is now occupied by the Union Pacific. Next. The typical of the Southwest mission style architecture, but not accurately depicted here, this temporary structure would be the eastern terminus of the San Diego and Arizona, and eventually San Diego and Arizona Eastern facility adjacent to the Southern Pacific Depot. They were right next door to each other. The next 3 views are of El Centro, and El Centro is the hub of agricultural harvesting and production in the Imperial Valley. And crop dusting is a major activity in the Imperial Valley to protect crops from pests. You can see a 3D plane coming right out of the wall there on this crop dusting. And we have the ubiquitous farmers market. Lots of fresh produce coming out of the valley. And there appears to be a poor fellow on the right-hand side there. It has an overheated radiator. Pretty warm out there in El Centro. The next two shots show busy daytime activity in the streets of El Centro. Dusk and nighttime brought families and a few daring teenagers out to the local drive-in movie theater. What's that activity emanating from the trunk of that vehicle with a white roof in the lower right-hand corner? Anybody participate in that activity growing up as a teenager? My wife grew up in El Centro, and she fondly remembers her parents taking her and her siblings to the Motor View drive-in, wearing their pajamas and slathered with mosquito repellent. There was no air conditioning and all windows had to be open. For the weary traveler, there's an appropriately named motor lodge available in the city. El Centro is the end of the line for this very interesting, short, but very scenic transcontinental connection to the east. With all the calamities, construction delays, the Mexican revolutionaries in 1911, World War I interruptions in 1917-18, the influenza epidemic of 1918, and line-side disasters, fires, landslides, cave-ins, no wonder it was called the Impossible Railroad. Thank you for booking fare on the San Diego and Arizona Eastern Railway.
That was
Thank you,
great.
Mike.
If we have any questions, please feel free to type them at any time into the chat, or you can just ask them now. Mike, I have one for you.
Yes, Trudy.
About all the structures, were most of those structures built at a certain, during a certain time period, or is this just a continuous ongoing process of doing the buildings and the structures?
The structures on the layout are supposed to represent actual structures or a
Right.
facsimile of an actual structure. We had a number of other structures in the layout for quite some time and they were removed. Reasoning being is they said those structures never existed on the layout. They were full of automobiles. And my question to the powers that be, well, where are all the automobiles you're supposed to have out there? And the response was, we haven't found them yet. So they're slowly filling in with automobiles in the area. Again, this represents a given day in 1949, early 1950 in the downtown area of San Diego and the entire line.
Another question, Mike, you talked about the difference in elevation. Is that represented on the layout? Do you actually use helper engines at parts?
Operators can use a helper if they have a particularly heavy or a long train and they need to get up or down the grade. So there is a helper positioned at Clover Flat. And even though it's not on the layout, other helpers would be at Coyote Wells on the eastern side of the Laguna Mountains down in the desert. Any other comments, questions? If you have any anything that you're puzzled about, if I might have misrepresented something, please let me know so that we can correct it for a future presentation.
The line that intersects El Centro, is that I know it's now Union Pacific, but has that always been Southern Pacific?
That's been Southern Pacific throughout the duration of the creation of the line, yes. And in fact, that line was very active, even going down into Mexico, Southern Pacific de Mexico, for a number of years. Part of the holdup was everything was built clear through Plaster City and over through Coyote Wells, but the hangup was the Carrizo Gorge. That's what was the delay for the majority of the layout.
The line used to go from, there used to be a line that went, I guess if you were going to take a passenger train out to Yuma, the line would go back into Mexicali and then over to Yuma, as I recall.
Yeah, through an area called Araz. Yes, for the passenger train and then to make the connection. So things were a challenge back in the early days. You can imagine trying to transfer from one line to the next. And but yeah, it was the last transcontinental connection across the United States in 1919 when the first train actually ran through.
Well, thank you
Mike,
so
my name's
much.
Gene Forbes, and I'm on the third Sunday crew. I'm curious to know is what's the current status of that line? Is there any operations on it whatsoever?
Not right now. There's been a number of entrepreneurs, including Kyle Railroad and a few others that have tried to open the line. They've all given up in frustration with the continuous washouts, fires, landslides. Hurricane Kathleen back in the 80s pretty well wiped out the line. And even though individuals can get out there, it's not recommended. They do protect the Goat Canyon Trestle from trespassers. But hopefully it'll be open one of these days, and the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum will start running FAM trips from Campo back down into Tecate and back the way they did a number of years ago.
Yeah, I was able to ride on one of those when I very first came to San Diego, the trip to Tecate. So I'm sure hoping they will. Also, Mike, we've got some great comments in the chat thing. Very interesting to get the details of the layout and the history of the Impossible Railroad. Another comment, wonderful presentation. Swell to see the details about the particular structures. So that was really great, Mike.
Thank you. Any other comments?
And Mike, yeah, Mike, this is Gene Forbes again on the third Sunday op
Yes.
sessions. I appreciate your presentation because it's given me a better perspective on when I operate. Gives me the picture that I needed. So
Very
thank you.
good. Very good. You're welcome. Come visit us on a Wednesday, Thursday sometime.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll take you up on
Yeah.
that.
Only we
Yeah, that
run
is- when
Christmas
we open
tree.
again. When we
Yeah.
open again on Wednesday and Thursday. We're still
Yes.
only Friday, Saturday, Sunday right now.
We just got word yesterday from Dave Winter and said that restrictions have been lifted unless you have not been vaccinated. You still have to wear your mask and you still have to maintain your social distance. However, crew chiefs can make the decision that they can allow more than the minimum of 3 or the maximum of 6. We can now bring in more crew members depending on what the day would call for.
And Mike, isn't there like a meeting of the board of the museum coming up in late July where we find out if we open more days?
July 22nd is the
Oh,
association's board of directors meeting, and they will then discuss whether or not we're going to be open by hopefully August 1st. But I heard something out there that may be as late as September 1st. It just all
Ouch.
depends. Yeah, that's really ouch. Yes. We have a lot of operators that are really faunching at the bit to get out there and to operate their trains.
Mike, I had a question about the when the museum is open for visitors. I typically see, of course, the operators running trains around the main line.
Yes.
I also understand that there may be some narrow gauge folks running, which
Correct.
the public doesn't necessarily see too much of. Now, my question is there any operations having to do with switching? That is, some guy stationed at some location doing some switching as part of operations. Is that even possible?
Yes, to answer your question, there are certain crews that constantly are in the switching situation. Generally, it's on the weekend crews. However, the mission is we're here to both entertain and educate the public about the San Diego and Arizona Eastern. And so we're not there just for our own self-gratification, even though that's part of it. We are there for the public. The public is paying good hard money to come in to view all the different exhibits in the museum. And that's why we have trains constantly running. Now, our Wednesday, Thursday crew, we run primarily in a Christmas tree direction. Other crews will run bi-directional. It just all depends upon what each crew wants to do. So because we have quite a few visitors during midweek, we like to have those trains constantly running. And one of the questions that the museum does not want to hear, where are all the trains? I don't see any trains running. And that's
Yes.
a real problem with some of these crews if they're doing nothing but switching. As far as the narrow gauge question goes, yes, it's hard to see from the aisles. However, if someone is invited in by a crew member, they can come in and observe the narrow gauge operation. If they're operating that particular day, then they have the chance to see narrow gauge in operation.
Mike?
So let me, if you don't mind, Roger, I'd like to drill down on it just a little bit. So one of the main reasons I ask is I can certainly understand and appreciate running the trains around, of course. But it seems to me when I visited sometimes there had been a dearth of trains running. And it just seems like, so my question really is it possible to switch an area, just switching without interfering with the main line during the day so that the public can not only see the trains running all around, but they could possibly see a switcher going back and forth in one area while the fellow or the person works that area doing some switching moves. Is that feasible? Are there areas that are operational but designed to not foul the main line?
Absolutely. One would be the Santa Fe main yard. There's ample opportunity for switching. And the other would be over in the El Centro area. If we're running Christmas tree, we're generally coming from east to westbound, and we come through the wall from the other side. And then that could interfere with any switching activity in the El Centro area. But certain operators like to do some switching in either the Santa Fe yard or the El Centro general area as well. Can be switched right there for the public to view. It's a good question.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Mike, remind the folks viewing here that the narrow gauge layout can't be seen by the public because of the way it's located, but those who are viewing us today will see it because after show and tell, you're going to show them the HO-N3 layout.
That's correct. It's coming up after your show and tell break.
And if you're really into narrow gauge, it's quite okay to go in and ask, to flag down one of the members and say, hey, I really would like to see the narrow gauge. Can I come in and see it? They're very, very helpful there. And most groups are glad to have somebody come in that has the interest in narrow gauge.
That's always an encouragement when somebody is really interested because we'd like to hand them an application to join as a member.
Bob has a question.
Yeah, Mike, I'm Bob. I used to live in Fallbrook. And I was very interested in the train line that happened there. What I was wondering if your museum will ever at least do some publications on the wall or something about how it went from National City all the way to downtown Los Angeles during this time period. And they did a spur to go through Camp Pendleton before it became Camp Pendleton, and Camp Pendleton inherited to go all the way up to San Bernardino. And they did a spur off of that to go into Fallbrook. And that lasted until 1970. When I was living there, I was doing research on it to get more. And I think also Spreckles did the line through Tijuana up to National City. So I think it went from National City, continued into Tijuana, through Tecate, up through Arizona. And it's that part of the history, it seemed like it's missing. You understand what I'm talking about?
Sure. I understand that, Bob. It is missing. lack of space seems to be a major problem for everybody in model railroading. And I keep threatening my wife, let's sell our house in North Park. Let's get a big piece of property with a big outbuilding so I can put in my particular layout. And she is meeting me with squinty eyes. That's not going to happen.
Yeah,
But yes, it
I
has.
understand that,
has-
Michael. What I was wondering is if
Yeah.
you can put some wall space, if nothing else, you
Yeah.
know, because to at least people be aware there is such an item.
That would probably be up to the museum itself to use wall space for that. And that's a really good suggestion. However, it has been proposed by at least one active club member to expand the layout considerably to show everything, combining with the La Mesa Club's Bakersfield to Mojave layout and showing everything up through the Los Angeles area. But it would require a tremendous amount of flexibility by the rest of the building participants in order to try to create a model railroad like that. But that's a good
Thank
question.
you very much.
Yeah, we'll try to approach the museum with that to see if they can get some sort of signage on the walls to educate the public on that. Yes.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Great conversation. I'm going to go ahead. Hang on. There we go. Just for feedback, Mike. All righty. So we're going to move on to show and tell. So I'm going to invite Don Fowler, if you would let me know if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, it's yours.
All right, let's see. Can you see my screen okay?
You look good.
Okay. I thought for show and tell today, I'd just give a little update on my progress on the layout. One of the blessings of COVID, if you could call it that, is time to work on the layout and modeling. I just finished up about 12 feet of scenery, and you know, there's no wrong way to do scenery. Everybody has their own preference and style. I just thought I'd share a couple ideas with you to see if maybe give you some inspiration to do some more scenery on your railroad. Some people are hesitant to do that. The area that I have worked on is the Bakersfield Yard, and it's I use it as visible staging actually for trains. This is the East End yard office, and this see some of the details here. We've got a repeater and a couple other things here. Used fine grit sandpaper for the asphalt access roads. And let's go on here. Here's another view, and you can see a stretch of highway running parallel to the main line. And we've got, this is where the trains head back down the hill out of Bakersfield. Here's a close-up of the yard office. I did some vending machines. A couple little details to kind of add to it. Used white pencil to create the lines on the sandpaper. I like to do things in layers when I do scenery, so I'll get the track and I do the ballasting first. Some people like to do the ballasting last. It's whatever you like.
Don, quick question.
Okay.
Use a white pencil. Where do you, oh, a white pencil, like a, like you buy a set of colored pencils. Is that the white pencil you used, or?
You can use that, or you can go to like Michael's or any art supply store and buy a white pencil.
It was just one of those white pencils you use then, because that's really even and nice looking.
Yeah, it came out pretty good. And then they got the bumpers there, so you don't roll past them into the dirt.
Thank you.
Don, did you like put tape down on the two sides and that, or did you just draw that wicked straight line with a ruler?
I drew that wicked straight line with a ruler.
Awesome.
It's not just straight, it's also the width of it is the same all the way.
I know.
Yeah, it's amazing at end scale. Good job.
Well, thanks. What else can I tell you? This is the pre-built structure that I just repainted into the company colors. I put a little light on there, and the vending machines, I just went online and found pictures of vending machines and reduced them and printed them on photo paper and then just glued them right onto the styrene there. And from a distance, it's pretty, you can't tell any different.
Coke or Pepsi? I can't tell.
That's Coke on the right, and on the left, that's a candy and chip vending machine there on the left.
Where's the Dr. Pepper?
Dr. Pepper, you have to go down to the other end of the yard.
Okay.
Okay. Here's a night view. It's not very good, but it gives you an idea of how much fun it is to run at night. The lights. I found these lights on eBay. They're less than $1 a piece. LED lights. They come in different lengths, and usually you get like 10 or 12 in a bundle for like $8 or $9. So it's pretty good.
Nice.
They're 3 volt. One of the things I added was the guardrail, the warning stripes. The inspiration for this was from the 125 when it comes down on Mission Gorge in Santee. They've had several vehicles go right on through that T intersection into the ravine. So I didn't want anybody running into the tracks.
Okay, so how did you do the stop on the road?
Okay, the stop is a stencil. There's a company that makes little brass stencils on HO and N scaling. Just tape it down, cover the surrounding area, and hit it with a light bit of flat white paint.
And the yellow stripes with a yellow pencil again?
Use a flat bladed screwdriver and scribe that after I paint the styrene. And then I used, for these lines, I used Woodland Scenic's striping pens.
Very good. Wow.
You can use a yellow pencil too.
Wow. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Let's see what else can I, the telephone poles. A lot of people like telephone poles. You can't see them, but there really are lines that run between the poles. But you have to really look close.
I might have to visit and verify that one.
Okay, I'm lying. They're not there. But one of the things you can do is you scribe with a razor saw, scribe the sides of the pole, and then well, first you paint it with a tan color and then scribe it. It pulls some of the paint off, so it gives you that wood grain effect. Here's another view of that same scene. You can see I've got like 3 trains staged ready to go down the hill. I also discovered, my wife is always telling me, you got to get some of this. I got some Spanish moss, and it really did well for some of this little vegetation stuff. It stands up, looks like it's growing. I've got some Woodland Scenics foam, and then JTT makes these little bushes. It's just another view. One of the things that appeal to me for railroading and model railroading are the linear aspects of it. And I had the opportunity to do a long stretch of highway alongside the Shard, but you can see several things. First is the highway, then you've got the gravel asphalt access road. You've got a asphalt service road in the yard. So you've got several things along with the track that provide that linear dimension. The access road here is, I use pan pastels with those little fine micro brushes, and it does a good job of creating that road. I couldn't resist doing a traffic stop, so gotta go,
Of course not.
fast.
It's in the blood.
It's in the blood. What are you gonna do? There's just another view coming back the other way. You can see some of the backdrop buildings. And here's, it's not a great shot, but you can get an idea of what the lights are like at night. Lights up the yard pretty good.
That's a
And-
nice scene.
Thank you. And here's kind of looking down you a little bit. You can get an idea how couldn't get through there, not enough room, so I went back onto the highway and then back out again, which they do sometimes. And in the back, you can see the graffiti on the base of the bridge. That bridge, I had it up less than 24 hours, and somebody went in there and did that. So. And here's another view from the other side, again, the vegetation. And that's it. I just thought it'd be fun to share my progress. It's about 12 feet of layout that I was able to finish up, and now I'm ready to move on to the next section. Anybody have any questions about scenery or about process or anything?
Yeah, Don, your repeater tower,
Yeah.
do you know the definition of a repeater?
Somebody that says something twice.
A repeater doesn't repeat a repeater, but repeats what a repeater repeats.
Sounds like a repeat from Pete.
Yep.
I've missed that, Gene. I've missed that.
Yeah, that was Jack's favorite for me. He loved it.
Exactly.
Yeah. A repeater doesn't repeat a repeater, but repeats what a repeater repeats.
Don, what's the source of your backdrops?
They're commercial. I'll try to get you the name of the company. It's not. I painted the sky and the clouds, and then I just cut out the it's self-adhesive vinyl, like wallpaper almost. It just goes on there, and some of them are just outstanding. This one worked in really well. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you for letting me share with you.
Thank you, Don.
Let's see.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right. And that was our first show and tell. Our next show and tell is Joe Niscoda. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, Joe. And hello, there you are.
Hi,
Hi,
my-
Adam.
Tony Skoda. I'm pretty much intimidated and humbled after seeing the two presentations that the gentleman just did. I'm nowhere near that. I used to work at the Train Museum in Scale in Balboa Park for 4 years. My fascination with trains began when I was living with my grandfather as a little boy, and a train actually went through my backyard. The layout you're about to see took me 4 years to complete. I had no idea what I'm doing. Uphill grades and curves were unknown to me, and I had problems because of that. Anyway, the size of the layout's 4x7. It's DCC, and I use an MRC system. The track switches are Kato, as you can see in the slide there. There's Kato track. The scenery uses Bragdon materials and forms. I used AnyRail software to design the layout. Two trains can run opposite direction at the same time on this layout. And I used real dirt sprinkled onto the layout to add realistic value to it. The control panel you will see in the slides is completely handmade using LED lights. And this layout really encompasses the areas of my life. The steel mill that you're going to see in the rivers from Youngstown, Ohio. The town that you're going to see is Carteret, New Jersey. The coal mine is what I saw in West Virginia. The tunnel idea, Moss Hole Mountain, is from Pennsylvania Turnpikes. The mining comes from Utah, and the housing being built comes from Oregon. And so let's begin the tour. What you're looking at is an overview of the downtown area, not so much, but the trailer park. And a little on the right side is the steel mill operation. Next. Here's a better view of the RV park, the downtown area, and the trains, my Cato track. In the lower portion of the picture, you see a fueling station for the diesels to get their oil. Next. Here we had a little accident. We had a landslide, and you'll see workers working to clear up the roadway. Next. This is the backside of the steel mill and the rolling mill, and the gravel pit is on the upper right-hand side. You'll notice that there is somebody working with the cement mixers and the tractors. Next. This is the gravel pit area. I got this idea when I was in Alaska. You'll notice that there's gravel going up the conveyor belts. We have tractors working, and there's on the upper of the picture, you'll see slots where they're putting the gravel in there depending upon the size. Next. This was my attempt to make a transition table between the steel mill and the rolling mill. As I said, it was my attempt to do it. It does work, but you have to slide it back and forth by hand in front of the tracks to get the train to go across. Next. This is the back side of the steel mill. You'll see the tractors in the foreground working, getting the coal off the ground from the train that brought the coal over to be dumped for the steel mill. You'll notice the in the way background, you'll see the rough area of the mountains. Next. Downtown area. This is Carteret, New Jersey, 1950s. You have a little theater. You have a little food place. And there's construction going on in the upper left-hand side. You see a cement mixer and a lot of traffic going up and down the road to the RV park. Next. And that's a better picture of it. I had a problem doing that because of the grade. Like I said, I didn't know about grades, and my train would not go up the grade to the gravel. So I had to take a sander and get rid of about 2 foot of grade in order for the train to get up there. And that's why the track goes so deep behind the town, is I had to make it so the train could go. Next. This is the construction of the houses. You'll notice that the most closest house to the picture is almost completed, and the next one's a little less completed, and then way in the background, they are just starting to build it. They had a car accident. He kind of slid off the road on the lower right-hand side. You'll see a car has slid off the road. Next. I had to have a truck station, and so I went ahead and I stuck this in the corner of the layout, and I should have put people in it, but I didn't. So you see the vehicles, but lack of people. I apologize. Next. Here's my control panel. You'll notice the Cato switches up above it. I got 10 switches, and I put LED lights on the layout so that whenever you flip the switch, the LEDs would either light up red or green, depending if it's a thoroughfare, it'd be green. If it's a siding, it goes to red. Next.
That's it.
I guess that's the end of the presentation.
I was looking for my mute button. Apparently I wasn't muted. Yes, that's the last slide.
Okay. Well, thank yous again. I'm really kind of embarrassed showing this after looking at the other two presentations. My big boy and Challenger that I own, along with some large diesels, cannot run on this layout due to the curves. The train goes up to the gravel company only one way due to the grades. It can only handle 4 cars because the grade is at 4 to 5%. I have over 100 boring pictures of the layout, beginning with a flat sheet of plywood to a finished product that you saw, but I spared you that. And I want to thank Ryan for assisting me with this slide presentation. And I still want you to know I play with trains. Thank you.
Joe, that's a beautiful layout. I think my favorite part though was your mining section where you had the accident. That was, I mean, your detail was beautiful. I loved it.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I had no idea that it was different portions of your life and where you'd lived or experienced. I'd seen it in person before, but you probably told me, but I didn't realize that, oh, this represents this place and another place that's relevant to you. That's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe, it looks like it's a pretty complete layout. Do you have any projects you need to still do on it, or what is your what's your thinking over the next few years of more building?
Well, I want to, I see mistakes on it and I want to correct them. I have, if you saw in the pictures, I have plastic all the way around it. And I'm taking that down because it takes away from the layout. I thought, well, originally, well, I'll protect the layout by putting this up all the way around it. And I discovered it takes away from it. So I do have some things I do want to add to it. I do want to correct and take off of there. And it's in work.
Is it pretty reliable? If you run it, are there a couple of trains you can run for a long time without too much
Oh, yes,
trouble around?
no problem there. I can run 2 trains without having to pay attention to them. Or if I want to start playing with it, I can run 3 trains. But I have to stop. I have to stop the train to let the other trains go on the switches.
Segues into what I'm really out.
Say again?
Oh, we looks like he's having a little hung up there. But
Joe,
it runs reliably for you, though. It sounds.
Yes,
like.
it does.
Yes.
No problem.
Joe, I have a question about your transfer table. Did I see a
Yes.
locomotive on? Did I see a locomotive on it?
Yes, you did. However, that is a fake locomotive. It's a diesel that was cut in half, glued together, and put on there as a work engine to simulate moving the ore cars from the steel mill to the rolling mill.
Ah, okay.
Joe, this is Paul again. Gosh, I lost connection right when I was asking about youngsters visiting. Yeah, so do you ever have youngsters visit? Because it seems like a fun layout to show off with a lot of action.
If people come out here, I do take youngsters in to show it to them. However, being here in Santee and where I'm at in Santee, I don't get that many visitors. I even invited Don to come over and look at my layout, and he kind of decided he didn't want to.
Oh,
Well,
Don,
thank
you
you.
got to unmute yourself.
I don't remember that. But I would like to come over.
Oh, anytime. I invited you, and you told me that you couldn't because at the time you were doing stuff, I think, with your wife or family, and you were very busy.
Okay.
And so I just let it go because I didn't want to bother you. And I seen your layout. It's fantastic how big it is and the work you're doing. And like I said, I'm kind of humbled looking at everybody else's, and then I look at mine and they go, oh, I don't know.
Every layout has special things about it, and some like your steel, your plant there. I'm really impressed with that. I'd like to take a closer look at that and take some pictures if you don't mind.
Sure, come on over.
Yeah, give me you got my contact info?
Don, I'll make sure you guys get together.
Thank you. I
He lives
Okay.
very close. He lives very close to you.
I appreciate just taking time and giving me those nice words about that. I'm really humbled about what I saw.
Well, thank you for sharing, Joe. I really appreciate everybody who takes the time to come on out and do a show and tell. I'm hoping we're back in person. People bring models and bring stuff and we can keep this going. So thank you very much, Joe. All right, are we ready for some narrow gauge? How's everybody? Anybody need to stretch? Mike, are you ready? Okay, all right, let me get set up here for Mike. Give me just a second to do that. I'm gonna mute myself and let you.
Okay, we're on. Can you hear me okay? All right, very good. Well, welcome back. This is a very unique part of our layout in the San Diego layout here. This is all narrow gauge, which is fictitious for the most part. There are narrow gauge operations that can be seen from the aisle if somebody's operating narrow gauge on a given day. And but most of this cannot be seen from the public's viewpoint. Burnt Ranch, again, fictitious location here, is one of the little western towns on the narrow gauge up above the Plaster City area. Next. So we just have some typical scenes. Been on the layout for quite a few years of all of the narrow gauge trackage through Burnt Ranch. And so for the next 3 or 4 views will just be different areas been created by former club members. Next. Next. A lot of details gone into it for the narrow gauge operators, which is welcome. There is a given day in the month that a group of narrow gauge guys get together and run their trains. And I think it was just, in fact, it's this weekend, as a matter of fact. I had a couple of club members approach me and they were sweating bullets thinking we were going to be doing this as a live tour on the layout during their narrow gauge operation days. And they wanted to know how that was ever going to work with a bunch of people coming through. And I had to assuage their fears that we were doing this on Zoom and not in the layout. Next. And continuing out of town. Next. There we go. Now we're traveling out of town. I'd like to have had some photos on here with some steamers out there in particular, the narrow gauge. Maybe next time. Next. The water tanks, the water tankers are up above this particular area here on the narrow gauge line. That's all the standard gauge for the regular main line. Next. And continuing on through. Now, this is a little mining town that's called Vance. Where that name came from, nobody seems to know. However, we call it No Name City. And if you're familiar with the 1968 classic Western musical, Paint Your Wagon with Lee Marvin and old Rowdy Yates himself, you'll understand the reference to No Name City or a mining town. Next. Tremendous amount of detail here. See the mines up on the hillside. It's very similar to what you'd find over in Arizona with some of the mines built into the hillside up above Sedona. And if you've been to Bodie, California, the old ghost town, you'd recognize some of these structures as well. So there you have it. That's No Name City, or Vance, as it was originally called. The narrow gauge trackage connects only through transferring loads from the processing plant in Plaster City to the standard gauge, which then can be transported east or west. And thank you for booking fare on the San Diego and Arizona Eastern HO Model Railroad layout. Thank you.
That is great. And if I can do a shameless plug, if there are any of our wonderful PSR members that would like to come run trains and like to join our club, the San Diego Model Railroad Association has O-scale 2 rail and HO, and we would love to have some more people participate.
Hey, Mike, on that narrow gauge, what is typical for the locomotives that are run? That is, you look at HO. Is it DCC, first of all?
Yes, it's completely DCC. And depending on the operator, they run primarily steam with very early diesel, but primarily steam, because that would be very appropriate for the time era.
Right. So, of course, the popular one would be a Shea, but is that something that's run, or is it more the
Depending
Rodwell?
again on the operators, Jerry Jackson, Steve Bradley, Bruce Cameron are just a few of the narrow gauge operators, and they have quite an inventory of narrow gauge locomotives that they can operate.
So they can get DCC into those tiny little Shea locomotives?
Jerry Jackson is an electronic wizard.
Wow.
He can. Right now, he's doing a Pacific locomotive for me in brass that I found from a neighbor of the Baraboo circus train back in the 50s and the 60s, sponsored by Schlitz and Old Milwaukee Beer. And I've given him all the necessary components, and he's going to set this up with plugs and make it a marvelous little engine for me. So that's not narrow gauge, but Jerry is a whiz. He can really do some amazing things.
Yeah, I guess I'm old enough where I'm still getting my head around the fact you can do DCC and N gauge, for example. So, yeah, okay, thank you.
We have David Lancaster, our first Sunday crew leader, actually operates in Z scale, and you have to talk to him about DCCing and Z. It's beyond my pay grade.
If I can pipe in for a minute, I've operated on the narrow gauge side. Both Jerry Jackson and Steve Bradley have primarily Rio Grande steam locomotives, Blackstone, and also then some brass. I haven't seen a Shea down there, but it's very cool narrow gauge layout. It's big. A lot of narrow gauge layouts are very small, and this one is big. It takes you a long time to get around it, but a lot of fun.
All right, man. Excellent. Good meeting, everybody. Lots of fun, lots of good conversation. Really appreciate everybody. All right. think we're just about ready to wrap it up. Let me see. I gotta. Nope. Sorry, just looking at my computer, making sure I'm not messing anything up here. All right, good. And one more thing before there we go. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll wrap up. Here we go.